This morning, welcome back. I hope everybody had a good time last night. Did you enjoy yourselves? All right. So, a little bit of housekeeping here. You'll hear a chime when you're in visiting the exhibitors, and when you hear that chime, you have 5 minutes. You also hear the chime at the end of the session 5 minutes out, so I just want to let people know kind of what's going on. If there's any questions, any concerns, anything you need, just stop over, ask Kathy, or contact me, anybody with the conference little badge thing here on, and they'll get you an answer or resolve your issues. I'm going to hand this off to Jim Harris from Coffman & Associates, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Andy, and good morning to everyone. Glad there are so many people here this morning. I wasn't sure last night what the turnout was going to be. Welcome to session number 5. This is advanced planning for project implementation and for a successful project. And before we get into that, I do want to thank our sponsor for this particular session, which is AAP Inc. So again, thank you for being the sponsor. You know, yesterday, Elliot Black made a comment, which I wrote down, which he said, planning is the most important thing. And I think that's true, but particularly for establishing the vision and knowing what you want to do. But now we got to start talking about implementing that plan and how do you get from point A to point B successfully. And so we have a couple gentlemen here today, which will probably forego the formal bios. You know these individuals, and they really don't need any introduction. But to my left is Jim Lomen, who is the ADO manager from the San Francisco office. And Jim has been the manager since, I believe it was mid-2005 is when you took the position. Or I'm sorry, 2015. You were elsewhere in Alaska, but 2015. And then Dave Cushing has been the ADO manager since 2011, if I'm not mistaken. But both these individuals have, become very engaged in this organization. We certainly thank them for that. So without further ado, I'd just like to turn it over to Jim and Dave, and I would pay particular attention because I think they're going to give you some very, very valuable tips and best practices to make sure whatever project you implement is successful. So, thank you.
Jim, thanks a lot, and Jim, I'm sorry. One of the things that we've been doing in the Los Angeles ADO, and I know Jim's been doing in the San Francisco ADO, has been to make real changes in the way we look at our planning process, not only internally with our staff, but with the whole community. And so
next slide.
Oh, next slide. Okay, next slide. We think that good planning is a good investment because good planning by anyone is more value for everyone. And the more we do it together, the more we can have better projects more efficiently laid out, which just makes for more efficient improvements and more better investment. So with this presentation, we're going to be talking about some of the changes we've made and best practices going forward, focusing mostly on the first 4 items of this slide, from project development through grant acceptance. Construction and closeout are obviously important parts of a grant cycle, and we can talk about that, but we want to focus more on what advanced planning is like. So with that, I'll hand it over.
Well, and then I think just to add that we did work with Mike Williams on this presentation. He was going to be joining us and then had some things come up at the office. So it is a combination of the 3 mainland ADOs that are contributed into this. And one thing we're going to talk about also is the idea of thinking corporately. It's not just about your airport. Robin shared yesterday the success we had with expiring funds, and we'll probably talk about that a little bit more, but that was airports and our office working together really closely and really thinking corporately that let's not let this money go someplace else. Let's see what we can do to help other airports in California. And so we have other opportunities, with carryover and some other things, again, that we'll talk about that really can make a difference for not just our airports, but in some cases, the airports across the country. So I guess think broader.
I really agree with that, because together as a community we can do more. And it's a two-way street, because, honestly, we want to find out, hopefully maybe this towards the end of the presentation, we'll hear more from you about what are some blocks for doing that. And, hold us accountable too. I mean, it doesn't mean that we're going to not be listening to individual airport needs. We definitely will be. But that I just think the upside to working together and getting our house in order is great, and could be self-fulfilling. So with that, we can just start talking about the cycle development.
Well, and I think the big thing here is, again, a lot of airports, I feel like, want to have a project every year. You don't need to have a project every year, and in some instances, your efficiency may go down. And what we would encourage is, or share, there's not enough money between our two offices in California and then with Mike in Arizona to fund every airport's desire. And so we really do need to look holistically across our areas and try to balance the need and make sure we're not putting all of our eggs in one basket continuously. And you know what, if you're banking some of your entitlements, that helps us down the road as well. And so we don't need to throw as much state apportionment or discretionary, and then we can reach out to other airports.
And I think that gets to the funding that we're talking about, when we can also build projects more successfully and then choose the project that is the best scope for the challenge, especially with pavement. That I think there's a lot of, with advanced planning with pavement management and good funding, I mean, it's a big challenge, and I think that there's opportunities to make our expenditure on pavement much more efficient, but we have to do it together. So that's going to be a little revolutionary, but I think we ought to be thinking that way. So when you talk about your airport and your plan for your future, do think about your funding sources and how the project will unfold. So, I'll go in and talk about your internal processes, because we recognize that there are political and bureaucratic requirements. So, map out how that's going to work out. From getting environmental approvals from your local governments, and then getting your ability to accept a grant, because I think that sometimes is a final hurdle that we need to get over to get a grant out in a timely manner. Do you find that, Jim?
Oh yeah, definitely. And I think we are so good to communicate to you often all of our deadlines. You probably can dream about our deadlines, because we tell you.
We'll talk about it more.
Yeah, we're going to talk about it more, and we're going to have some more slides. But we always, are communicating our deadlines. So take into account your internal processes as well, and back everything up. I mean, as we look at 2018, I mean, we're talking about that in our office now, is, by December 31st, what things are expected in our office, and what you need to accomplish in your areas to meet that deadline. So it's never too early to start talking, next year's out.
Did I go too far? I did.
No, you're still on the same slide. You'll notice I gave Dave the clicker. There was no way I was going to touch that thing.
I'm missing this is not in the order I was expecting them in. All right. Well, let's go with what the presentation is.
that's it.
All right. Well, then my script is off. Fine. I can look at the screen. So I really love the next slide. I thought we were going to have, but that's more color commentary, I suppose. So of course, we talk about advanced planning, and the way we've talked about planning first is you plan first, you get your ALP, then you get your environmental, then you do the design, and then you get your grant. So, of course, when we start talking about advanced planning, you think about, is it on the ALP? So you definitely need to be thinking about your airport in terms of the plan view. So it's not just something that helps you plan for the future of your airport. Obviously, it does, but that it is simply a requirement. We have to be clear amongst us what the plan is for your airport. What type is it? What mark is it serving? What is a prudent and reasonable investment in that airport? So that's really why it's on the ALP. The ALP is a good document for general planning purposes anyway, but I think it's the basic agreement that the federal government and the federal taxpayer has with the local government about what is the nature of this airport.
And to kind of build on the ALP is, with the advanced planning, something we just started this past year is we're actually looking at 6-year ACIPs and really trying to look far out, because what we found is, and we've communicated to some of our sponsors, we had a real bubble in these last 2 years because we were great at getting out design grants. Those are pretty darn easy. You can do a design grant, but there's this sticky requirement. If you design it, you really should build it. And so now we have all these building projects coming in because we did all those designs. And so that's when we decided, okay, let's back up and let's do a longer term look. And so then maybe in year 4 or 5, we'll put in some design grants, and then we can start anticipating the construction that's going to follow. And the other thing we're really trying to emphasize, and we're going to be communicating back with our sponsors, what we think we might be able to reach in 18, 19, and 20. I mean, we're not going to talk money or anything, but, just our strategy, so that kind of what we're thinking, and so we don't have these surprises when, we sit down for our ACIP meeting and we have this nice list that we thought we were all in agreement on, and then you come in with something that really is kind of surprising. We weren't expecting it because it's completely different than what we had in our system. So we're going to try to improve our dialogue and communication so that in the out years, we can have some stability, and that's what's really, I really want to see us, trying to accomplish better, so that what's going to happen in 18 and 19, and so do we. And if you have a big, expensive project, we may have to put it out in 20, but you know what? If you keep it in 20, we're going to do our best to make sure that we can meet that need. And the other important thing about the stability of your ACIP is, we don't have surprises. You don't come in 2017 and say, I want to do this project. I know you never heard about it before, but, hey, we think it's a great idea. Well, lo and behold, it's not on the ALP. There's a challenge. Oh, you haven't done environmental yet? And so, those are the kind of things where if we can lay things out and stay consistent in our discussions, and we're just kind of updating the out years when we get together, that's good planning. And that helps us both.
Yeah, absolutely. And not only in getting better projects for you and having the plans make more sense for your plans and your requirements, but again, when we can plan out, we can spend the money more efficiently, which means more good planning by anybody is more money for everybody. So,
and I guess one thing I would just throw into that, I'm really trying to push as much as we can in our office that let's not do phase 1, phase 2 of projects. If there's a way that, maybe it's going to be kind of expensive, but if we can fund the whole project in 1 year, let's just mobilize once. Let's just get it all done. But you know what? Don't expect a grant in the following year just because now you have a space opening. But we really want to try to get some efficiencies, not only with our funding, but also with the development as well. This is a great slide. Mike put it together, so I don't think either one of us can take kudos for that. But if you save nothing from this presentation, save this slide, and then I would encourage you to live by it. The one thing you'll notice on it is there's a common thread in each of those years. Anybody see it? No, it's not environmental. Consult the ADO. There you go. Some people are paying attention. That's great. So no, yeah, that is something that we want to be involved in your plans in the way out years. And the more dialogue we have, I don't know how you guys feel about it, Dave, but the more we talk, the better we can help each other be successful. And really, that is our goal. Sometimes it may not seem that way, but we really want to see our airports succeed.
And I think with the LA ADO, I mean, we can say Dave Cushing did that, Dave Cushing did this, but really what's happened with the Los Angeles ADO is we lost Arizona and we got more planners. So it's not just Margie. In fact, it's never Margie because Margie's gone. But so when we have more planners, I mean, it seems to me that an ASIP meeting is a little bit of a red herring in some cases. To me, planning is something that happens all the time, and surer and sooner is better than later and vaguer.
So I've been practicing that for weeks.
I have been. So, I mean, an ASIP meeting can be a confirmation. An ASIP meeting could be the meeting where you come by and you drop off your approved environmental, right, for the next year, and we talk about 5 years out, and we, go for lunch. It doesn't have to be this big deal. If we have sooner and surer planning, then the content of the ACIP meeting is just as important as its schedule. So more development with your planner and your environmental protection specialist as well. We have more resources in both San Francisco and Los Angeles than not that many years ago. So let's continue to take advantage of that. We kind of caught a wave. We need to catch another wave, and this is what we're talking about. Sort of that arrow there, that's the wave. Any more on that one?
No, I think that.
I would take this to consult with. I agree. I think
Yeah,
that's a
no,
good
it's
slide.
it's a important slide, and I guess the other thing is, you know what? We'll get to that later. Never mind.
Oh, NEPA. NEPA, is this your next slide? Yeah. I don't know how I think my computer problems jumbled the slides.
That's because you're using paper. You got to go, with technology, Dave. I'm just telling you.
Wait, it was my thumb drive that put into the... Go figure.
So, we can't overemphasize the importance of, the planning. I mean, we talk about that because it leads into your environmental. And how many of you have found yourself going into an environmental and then find out you're doing more planning than you are environmental? And, that is a challenge whenever that occurs. Hopefully we're doing a lot of CAT-X's, but if you're doing an EA or, heaven forbid, an EIS, we want to make sure that that's planning has been done in advance.
And we see that in LA. I think we see that everywhere. And we do live in California for those of us that for those of you who are dealing with us. So environmental is always going to be important. And, we strive to not make it more difficult. But it's important that when we're doing the environmental, we're focusing on the environmental questions. For us, it's air quality, species, and culture all the time. Air quality, species, and culture.
Yeah, it's so funny. I came from Alaska. We got a lot of wildness up there and a lot of, cool species and stuff. I've never been in a place where you have these silly little, wait.
You're being recorded, Jim.
Yeah, not, thank you for that reminder, Dave. No, it's, I was so surprised that, you have species that only occur on your airports. Plants and animals and things, and it was like, wow, I never would have expected that. And so anyway, so there's unique challenges here, environmentally that we want to make sure that we get out in advance and do it right.
Well, those species evolved there since the Fish and Wildlife Service put them on there. So they
hey, Dave, we're being recorded.
Oh, thanks for reminding me, Jim. I remember when I heard it was like, well, why are you talking about this invasive species? Yeah, the invasive species on the list. It's like, how can an invasive species, anyway? Well, of course, this is the, and of course, because the whole goal is to get to construction, so I don't know what the next slide is. Oh, no, this is a good slide. It's on the list. Right, this is the keep us out of jail slide. Now, of course, one of our business plan goals, one of our strategies is to be sustainable and responsible, and this is part of being responsible. So it's not, it's certainly a unique role that we play, but it's something that we're certainly 100% behind. So we all want to make sure we don't get sued and don't get the project stopped or otherwise go afoul of federal law. Now, I do know, and I think Elliot and I'll hand this over in a sec, but Elliot and Peter discussed what a federal action is and whether or not some actions now maybe should or should not be federal, or the federal action should be earlier or at ALP approval. I wouldn't be surprised if those things change and develop over time. But for now, approval in the airport layout plan is a federal action, and I don't see that going away. Federal funding requests, federal funding approval is a federal action, and passenger facility charge approvals, which are normally part and parcel to that. Now, this is the last item, is where we get most of the pushback. That items that are not in any way AIP related, but that do have a change to your airport layout plan is still a change to your airport layout plan, which requires approval. So those are the top 4 items that require environmental review.
And Dave, I think that last one is a great reminder because it's so easy to, FAA is not involved with this project, so why do I need to even talk to them? That goes back to that communicate with us often, and, because that's a horrible surprise. There's nothing more uncomfortable than to say, yeah, you're getting ready to do this development, and yeah, we don't have any money in it, but oh, by the way, you still need to complete an environmental document. And but back to just the environmental in general, there's something about when we can go in and look at what we're trying to achieve in a project, and if we can minimize the impact to the environment. I mean, I've seen so many examples where we have made the project better and protected and improved the environment at the same time. And that's a feeling of accomplishment. And so if you look at it as a goal to achieve, in addition to accomplishing your project, you're making friends with the community, and you're making friends with the neighbors, and so that's something to strive for.
I think we'll talk more about that this afternoon.
Yeah.
That assets for your airport are not just pavement. You've got legal assets, you've got political assets, you've got community assets, and they're all worth managing. And I never come up here and think that your jobs are easy, because they're not. But in some cases, these are opportunities. I might add to this slide before we move on that releases are federal actions as well. So, I know. Now, what I mean a release is a release for disposal, where it comes on the out. It becomes not your property anymore, right? And really, we use the word release. We probably shouldn't. We should only use release when we mean that, because a complete release of obligations.
So did we mention good planning? That is part of the the timeline as well. And Dave kind of touched upon it. Is we want approved NEPA by December 31st. That's something, one of the things we've communicated over and over again, and something that the three of us, Mike, Dave, and I were talking about is, if you have a CAD-X and you're submitting it to us December 31st for approval, yeah, you're late. But what we would like to encourage people to do is, when you come to your ACIP meeting, target bringing that draft CAD-X or your CAD-X submittal to us then. I mean, in San Francisco, we're still trying to move up our ACIP meetings. We did a great thing back in 2016. We got it moved up to where we had most of them done by end of October. We did even better this past year, and as we start moving into 18, we're going to be looking at having our ACIP meetings even a little bit earlier. So, because it gives the airport, it gives us all time to make sure we're good for the upcoming year, but then also start focusing on the out years.
I want to talk about more about that later, and maybe during the question and answer period, but remind me.
Okay. Can someone remind Dave of that? That's all I have.
All right. And I do remember these realistic timeframes for EAs and EISs. Please, 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 please. It seems like every EA we get is an expedited one. This is really the time frame that we see and experience. So.
Well, and Dave, how many people do you have in your office that environmental folks that review all of your environmentals?
2.
Yeah, I have 2. And so you think about the number of airports we each have, and they're all trying to move projects forward, and every project is important, every airport is important, but we still got 2.
Right, and one of them's dealing with LAX, so really, 1 1/4.
So this is my favorite slide. Again, thank you to all the airports, and the consultants and everyone that worked so hard. The carryover, for those that aren't really familiar with that, going back to the university perspective here as a teaching opportunity, carryover is every year airports earn entitlement funds, And, there's years where you can't use those entitlement funds. Maybe, you're banking them, as we call it. You're not going to use them at all. You're going to save them for the coming year. And because you can bank up to, non-primary is 4 years and primary is 3. Anyway, something like that. Yeah, so what you do in that case is you carry over those funds. And when you carry those funds over, they go back to the big bank account in D.C., and they collect all these carried over funds from the rest of the country, and then that money is returned to the regions, all of the regions, as discretionary funds. And so that's why you'll kind of see we'll get a first hit of discretionary early in the year, but then it kind of trickles in because that's all based on the carryover that airports are reporting. So this is your opportunity to once again be thinking corporately and helping the rest of the airports, not only in California but in the rest of the country, is report your carryover early. Matter of fact, during our ACIP meetings this past year, with December 31st being a deadline, and if you have projects, everybody's got to submit something. Well, we added on, submit your carryover request, even if you know you're not going to have a project, so that way every airport should be submitting something to our office on December 31st. No one gets a break. And so that way, as soon as the funds come into our office, we can carry those over, and that's helpful to the rest of the country as far as getting that discretionary out earlier, so we can get grants out earlier, you can get the shovels in the ground. And expiring funds are a little bit different. So expiring funds are the ones that this is the last year that they are able to be used, and oh, dang, you don't have a project. You don't have anything you can spend those on. And so the thought is, well, I'll just carry them over, and, well, you don't get them back. So what that means is that money will go back to D.C. and then get distributed to the rest of the country. Maybe we'll get 8% of it. And so that's why we have been emphasizing so strongly the importance of, if you have expiring funds, reach out to the airports in your vicinity, see if they have any needs that they could use those funds for, because you carry it over, you can't use it. So why not just transfer it to one of the airports within our state, within our region? And what that means is, you transfer $150,000, that's $150 of state apportionment or discretionary. Our offices don't have to spend. And historically, San Francisco ADO has had 4 to 6 million expiring in a year. That's a lot of money. You start adding that up, that's some big projects that that we're not able to do. But when you transfer that funds, now we have that 4 to 6 million in state apportionment or discretionary available to help other airports in this room.
And you can transfer them to Southern California.
Yeah, you can, but
no, actually, airport system. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Yeah, he's here all week. So, I can't overemphasize that enough. Even now, start looking, if you know you have expiring funds, start those conversations. Matter of fact, I've already signed 3 or 4 transfer agreements already this year. We send it to the region because they have to kind of process it. They send it back and say, you're way too early. Don't hear that very often. I love being way too early. And if you could be way too early, that'd be good too.
So here's the support slide for carryover deadlines, and these dates are always the same, are they not? Or
sure.
Yeah, we're oftentimes making harried phone calls to confirm that you don't have a project, or but that gets back to the quality of the conversation you're having with your planner, which gets me a little bit more to the deadlines and timetable. I know that Phoenix, Northern California, Southern California share some of the same consultants, and that the LAX ADO has not moved to move up our ASIP meetings. We have not made a move to do them earlier. Right now, I haven't decided that we need to do that, but here's the deal. If it's not sooner, it's going to be surer. So the content of your meetings are going to have to be a lot better. We're going to have bringing your environmental to the meeting. Your approved CADX, reminding us this is it. or at the very least your draft CADX in good working order, or your Fonzie's in the final, or you hand it to us, show it to us. Here's the first page of the Fonzie, that's for that current year, and then we stop talking about it, other than estimate updates and when is your bid opening, that kind of thing, which your PM will be discussing, and your planner is going to be saying, okay, what about 2021? What about 2019? What about 2020? That kind of thing. So for now, we're not making a move on timing, but if we don't see that improvement in readiness, we may have to do something like that. And I later on, I'd like to hear from you guys. Is that a problem?
So one thing, so when I got here in 2015, we were having kind of a challenging year, and we did our first grant offer July 17th or something like that. It was in July. We did our first grant offer. That's pretty darn late. Last year, we had over 54% of our grants out by the end of July. Huge improvement, which there's a lot of people in this room that are responsible for making that happen. Matter of fact, we did 5 grant offers in April, which was excellent. The one challenge, and something I think we're going to have to talk internally is, we're so focused on, let's get the grant out, and I mean, I have charts on my wall. My staff is like, oh my gosh, where'd this guy come from? Yeah, they're really nice charts. But we were tracking everything, entitlement funds going out, and then how well people were, having inactive grants. But what I realized is, yeah, we did great getting the money out, but we have 59 grants totaling over $57 million. 2 of them are 2015, the rest are all 2016, 0 drawdown. That's concerning to me, because we're going on now. I mean, some of those grants, I was looking at it, there's grants from April, May, June, July, August, and September. September ones may be a little bit more understandable, but I don't understand. Here we all work so hard to get the grants out. Why hasn't there been drawdowns? And why isn't there activity? I mean, that's our ultimate goal in trying to get these things out is, get that federal dollar working for all of us. So I almost think, when you get the grant, your first question should be, okay, what do I need to reimburse myself for? And then you should be talking to your contractor, where is your reimbursement request? And there are some airports we talked to, and we're going to talk, I know Rod's going to talk about this afternoon, is, why are you carrying all this debt that you've paid your contractor, but you haven't asked for a reimbursement? Don't get it. But again, maybe someone can explain that to us. So there's more to just getting a grant. It's the management of the grant. And actually, can I do something here, Dave?
No, I don't know.
You sure?
All right.
Okay. So for the folks in Northern California, you have had the opportunity to receive a report card. Can I see a raise of hands of who has seen their report card? Look at that. Some of you are waving your hand and smiling boldly. Others are kind of going, yeah, I got a report card. So one thing, this past week, my wife and I presented to the staff in San Francisco a little token of our appreciation, because she appreciates the fact that our staff works so hard and they make my job so much easier, because they really are trying to help all of the airports. So she was totally on board with us presenting a gift to our staff. So I started thinking, you airports, are really helping us as well, because I've seen the report card go out. And so I have to acknowledge that within the San Francisco ADO, we have an airport that has an A, 4.1 grade point average, and happens to have the highest grade point average in the whole Western Pacific region. So with that, I think it would only be appropriate to also show my appreciation to just one of many airports that are working really hard to manage their grants well. And so Leander, could you please come on up? So what the grade, for those who aren't familiar with our little grade point, so anyway, thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Nicely done. So, you know, what Leander has achieved is he's gone beyond just receiving the grant. You know, he's looking at, and so what we grade on is current drawdown activity, historical drawdown activity, closeout timeliness, O&B drawdown rate, whether you have attachments to your reimbursement request. Have you documented what you're spending your money on? And
do that.
And so anyway, you know, and I know Dave has a copy of the database, so, you know, if you have questions, you know, feel free to reach out to him. But, you know, we kind of share the report card as, I mean, somewhat, you know, with a smile on our face and, you know, kind of a, you know, little elbow nudge or whatever, but it's an opportunity to really kind of get a picture of how well you're doing managing your grants, because it's not about just getting the money, it's about using the money well. And that's what that report card represents. And
you know, and I need to emphasize that, because it's not just Southern California LAADO. It's not like just we have to keep up with him. That's not the only problem. I mean, there's a real why behind this. I mean, I'm telling you guys, being a high-performing region together is important, and it's only going to get more important. So don't think that this is an annoyance. It's, I think, essential. It's how we track it. Deadlines. I know everybody wants to work to the deadline. We actually want you to be wanting to exceed the deadline so that together we can improve the entire performance of the region, because we will be spending our money more efficiently. We will be getting more bang for our buck. We will be getting better projects, and we'll just look better. And I think that's going to matter. If it didn't matter before, it's going to matter now.
Yeah. Well, and what's really interesting is it's not just a report card on you. It's a report card on us as well. We sent it out, and there's a couple of airports called back, say, wait a minute, that closeout came in to you months ago, and so why am I getting dinged for that when ADO, you have that? So it's not just your report card, it's our report card as well, and you know, we're striving to do better ourselves.
And I totally agree with that. So with that, I think we have questions.
Okay, this is your chance. It's all being recorded. So you, if you want your answer now, I would.
Careful.
I would take it. I guess one quick question for you, and then we can go to the others. But I'm sure a lot of Southern California, Nevada, Arizona airports are thinking to themselves right now, Dave, or are you guys going to be doing the report card system in the near future as well?
We're still looking at it. I think what I envision would be more kind of looking at it from our staff perspective. Like, these are all things that a good planner and a good PM ought to be paying attention to. So right now we're kind of looking at it internally, whether it becomes part of your ASIP meeting or individual consultation with your staff. I don't know that we're going to have a big rollout, but the diagnostics are there. I mean, it's not, you can't really argue with it. You know, whether it's an A or a B plus or whatever, you know, that's all kind of just a cute little feature. I mean, it's important, but it's
Cute little feature. You don't know how hard it was to make that come out right. You know, the one thing I should say is the report card is something we just share with you. It's not something that we're posting on our bulletin board or emailing out to everyone. So, you know, there's confidentiality there. And so just if any of you have that concern, just know that it's not something being broadly shared. And we just kind of made the decision. I asked the planners and engineers to send it out because I felt like it was important for you to know what we were seeing.
Okay, great. Question?
Just a couple of comments and questions. Oh, hello there. Los Angeles County Department of Epidemiology found hazardous liquids and fumes over the Los Angeles County, Willowbrook, Redondo Beach, North Redondo Beach, and Inglewood in terms of fumes and hazardous liquids. The Department of Epidemiology research resulted in no significant action by the Board of Supervisors of Los Angeles County. The reason I'm mentioning this is how the FAA approached this, and if there was any kind of agreement with these bodies. The other one that I was concerned about was the Rams Stadium. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the ownership of Rams essentially was found by FAA to be in violation of Part 77 in terms of height. Correct me if I'm wrong. When we're talking about fast track advanced planning, the Rams Stadium went through relatively quickly without necessary steps involved in great detail. We could go to FONSI, finding of no significant impact, environmental assessment, first phase. So I wanted to get your comments on both of those in courtesy to you.
I don't think I can respond to either of those. I'm not familiar at all with your first point, and I wouldn't even know where those fumes came from or what the federal action is at this point. I mean, I do know for sure when we're taking a federal action at LAX, we're analyzing air quality to a fare thee well. I mean, extraordinary detail. The source apportionment study, perhaps that's what, is this LA County or was it a university program?
It was not only Los Angeles County that essentially notified the FAA, but it was also surrounding communities. The city of Inglewood, which is adjacent directly to Approach, and also Willowbrook, which is an unincorporated area of Los Angeles County, and various communities, at Approach. And what happened, I'm not being an advocate for these communities. I work for the city of Los Angeles, but I'm trying to see how that fit into advanced planning, how fast the FAA would be aware of that, and how fast that they would move to work with the Los Angeles County.
Well, our partner is the project proponent, so it would be in this case. I suspect that you're talking about LAWA, but I don't know whether this source material is coming from. So we definitely work very, very closely with LAWA, Los Angeles World Airport, City of Los Angeles, on their environmental impact and their air quality, including very in-depth studies and discussion of the legal basis for the air quality impacts. Now, that's about all I can say, and these are ongoing studies, so we don't have any conclusions now. With regards to the Rams, that may be more of an appropriate discussion with air traffic. We certainly did comment on the stadium, and to the degree to which we're responsible for commenting on certain surfaces. So I think you'd probably have to talk to air traffic about that. Maybe both of these would be an air traffic
Well, in terms of dimensions, the stadium itself was lowered. And this is not, again, advocacy or I got you by the pants. The thing is in terms of advanced planning, the stadium dimension, the height, and as I said, this would be consistent with Part 77 requirements. It was lowered. So everybody's happy, except the Rams are not doing very well. I can sure as hell say that. But the whole thing is, what can I say, the Browns, I don't want to talk about the Browns. I'm a Packers fan, and I will be until I die. But the whole thing is how the FAA, in its talent and its requirements for advanced planning, or how that would fit within a planning structure.
Well, I think that really gets more into a land use planning kind of thing. And it's interesting that you bring that up. That's not really the subject of this topic. Rhetorically, I see how you slipped it in, sir, but that we are upping our game in land use planning. I mean, we do have lots of actors involved, and some of which we're not traditionally communicating with, but we are upping our contact with Caltrans and the City of Los Angeles and SCAG. We're already involved with the Air Quality Management District very closely through our sponsors, not directly, but simply getting more exposure to what's going on. I mean, I think that the airspace case, I don't know of any flaw in the process for the airspace. I mean, we would expect that folks in LA County and across California will be building things. So the fact that it has a public nature to it, I mean, I do note that it tore down a grandstand for the racetrack. So, I mean, the things don't go under glass just because it's somewhat near an airport. But anyway, let's move on.
And just
We have a
really
question
quick,
back there.
one really quick comment on the airspace thing is, you know, as much as the airports or the counties or the consultants, you can communicate to potential proponents. You know, so often we get airspace cases and it needs to be turned around immediately. You know, again, good planning, get in early, and so it's not a rush and it can be done properly.
Okay, let's go with Jim, and then Joe's next.
Jim and Dave, thanks for the session. It's great. And since it was brought up in the session, I don't think anybody in this room can blame me for asking this next question. If you have any expiring entitlement funds, Palo Alto Airport, would love to hear from you.
Well, you know, I mean, I totally support that. I mean, you guys have a bingo or something, you know, expiring entitlement bingo. I mean, you know, well, I mean, the sense is that, and by the way, we should emphasize that the agreements to assign expiring entitlements, we accept them and acknowledge them and sign them to our acknowledgement, but we're not a party to the agreement.
Jim, I didn't come up to that.
Joe.
Phoenix, good to hear. Likewise, we'll accept all expiring funds. But my question is related to the 6-year ASIPs. Do we think that's going to become the standard that we should look ahead to and start preparing for?
I don't think, I mean, it won't be probably a national standard. I mean, we've had, you know, the standard 3-year ACIP, and then we try to look out 5 years has been kind of common. It was just the challenge we were having, and, you know, some airports don't have that much information, and that's okay too. I mean, we sure didn't turn them away, but if we're looking at a long-term development plan, then I think going out 6 years is really important so that we can have that stability and that strategy.
You know, and that's a mutual challenge. I mean, that's not just you guys do better. That's on all of us, including the two of us.
It's okay to talk about it with consult with your ADO as what's going on.
Keith.
Keith Freitas, Contra Costa County. I'm sorry, I just recorded Leander Hurry, Livermore Airport. The team has always been great to work with for Contra Costa County. Our biggest challenge is the timing, and I know this is much bigger than ADO. When we're trying to do contractors and we do the bids, and grants are based on bid, you know, we get those done in March, and then we have to hold until we get the funding. That might be July or August, even September. You know, the contractors are holding that, and if we miss the construction window, now we're asking them to hold it for a year, and that's very difficult. So I know it's much bigger than ADO, and you wonder why we sometimes are missing the drawdowns. When we've got to hold that, now we're parking, and there's just nothing happening. So it's difficult trying to make that timing. If we could get those funds released in May would be great, but I know it's much bigger than just ADO, but that's a challenge for us.
And we understand that, and we really tried to look at airports that, in some instances last year we had the split year, and so what we did is, in some cases, we forward funded your entitlements with state apportionment, and then once you got the second phase of your entitlements, you didn't know this happened, but we did a little switcheroo in the back and took your entitlements and brought the state apportionment back. I mean, we try to look at strategies to be able to move forward, but if you have a large discretionary project or something like that where we're waiting for the discretionary to come, yeah, our hands are kind of tied, and that goes back to what I was saying earlier. if you report your carryover earlier, then, you know, if we could get everybody in the country to do that, then we would be able to have that, some of that discretionary come to us a lot quicker. But yeah, it's a challenge, but we are always trying to figure out ways to kind of skin the cat a little bit smarter, but sometimes it's a dull knife.
Hey, Jim, can I just add to that? And I think the important thing is, again, communicating with the ADOs, because the ADOs control the state apportionment, they control the entitlements, but the discretionary, we set a priority list. So we kind of know in the ADO, I mean, we're not going to know it's July 1 instead of July 15, but we kind of know where you are in the priority list and what word we're getting from headquarters as to when each release of discretionary is going to come and approximately how much the region's going to get. So, I mean, it's, if we know that your project is the bottom of the discretionary list, then it's probably better for you to hold off on those bids, even though you're ready, and not bid till later in the year. So again, it's all about communication, because we have a lot of that information. I mean, we may not know at this point on April 28th what they're going to do, whether we're going to get phase 2 or 3 or whatever, but you know, once the money starts coming, we have a pretty good feel.
Well, to add to that, Robin, I think, and these gentlemen can speak to that, but the staff is really good at working with the sponsors on looking at alternate bids based upon what might possibly come down in the form of discretionary money. So you might speak to that on how the bids are packaged.
Well, and that was one thing we really tried to stress last year is if a sponsor was able to come in early and have bids early, and then we knew that other projects were going to be later in the year, we actually tried to more fully fund the sponsors that came in early based on bids, and maybe give them a bid of alternative or two to help them go a little bit further with their project. Back to the idea is we want to reward those that are getting bids in hand early and are ready to go and get that money out there. So, and that's part of the conversation we have during the ACIP meeting is, you know, looking at that phasing of a project, and if we can get a little bit further, then we sure try to do that.
And that's another example of a plan that's almost micro planning. You know, getting planning your bids alternates so that you can pull up spending that would otherwise be in subsequent years, which then makes things nicer for the next year for everybody. So that's the kind of things that we can accomplish together.
And actually, an important point that came out of our conversations as we were putting this presentation together is the idea that we identify projects that we call our dump projects. So at the end of the year, if there happened to be, you know, a slew of surprise money, we've already talked to those airports, and so what we've been trying to communicate to the folks in, you know, the ADO or the airports in our ADO is that if we haven't really talked to you about it, then, you know, don't plan to have a project at the end of the year and call us and say we want to, you know, any extra money that comes in, because we're already strategizing for that, and, you know, and it's part of our big plan of trying to buy down, you know, next year's ACIP. So, so hopefully that relieves some stress. Is kind of the reason I share that is you don't have to be chasing us for the money at the end of the year.
What Jim meant to say is there is no year of in money, so just don't worry about it. That's better. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, we've reached.
Well, I just wanted to add one question, and that from me to the room, and I know we don't have a lot of time, but what do we don't know about your calendar needs? I mean, what is it that we don't know, Jim and I, about your calendar challenges? Just one item. The first person that raises their hand. No, nobody's brave enough. Anybody say, okay, I mean. You know what that means is we know a lot. That's right. Right. We know everything.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what, we've come to the end of our session, but again, I think the point was made that communication is key, and I know that certainly Jim, Dave, Robin, all the FAA folks have come down here and spent their time here to initiate a lot of that communication and continue that dialogue. So really take advantage of it, because I know they're reaching out and want to do that. So Again, we want to thank Jim and Dave for their participation, and on behalf of the association, I know we have a contribution to Wounded Warriors in your name that we'd like to give you the certificate, and I believe there's some toffee, if I'm not mistaken, as well as a little gift. But we want to thank you very much for that. And again, our sponsor for this session, AAP. So again, if you can help me thank our presenters and our sponsors. Thank you.